And welcome back to another edition of This Day in Sports History, a member of the Sports History Network. You can find more info and more podcasts at sportshistorynetwork.com. It's July 18th, and on this day in 1912, two men met each other on the tennis court, 3 months after both of them nearly died on the Titanic. The road to any final is usually fraught with challenges and obstacles, but the two men who met on this day stared death in the face in the icy waters of the Atlantic when the so-called unsinkable ship sank in the early morning hours of April 15th. Just a refresher on the sinking of the Titanic, on April 14th at 11:40 p.m., the ship struck an iceberg, opening a hole in 5 compartments of the ship. Once the damage was surveyed, it was determined that the ship was indeed destined to sink. Lifeboats were ordered to be lowered. The first one went down at 12:45 a.m. At 12:55 a.m., lifeboat number 5, the second to be launched, was lowered. On that boat was 26-year-old tennis player Carl Baer, along with his soon-to-be fiancée, Helen Newsom, and her family. Baer had been ranked in the top 10 tennis players in the world at one point. In 1907, he played in the doubles finals at Wimbledon. But now he paddled away from the sinking ship to avoid being sucked down with it. Still on board was 21-year-old Richard Norris Williams, who was keeping a watchful eye out for his father. The pair were traveling back to the U.S. Williams, a distant descendant of Benjamin Franklin, was a U.S. citizen but had been born in Switzerland and was heading back to the States to attend Harvard in the fall and to play tennis. His father, Charles, was a huge tennis fan, and he kept detailed notes of tennis players that Dick might face at some point in his career in a small, moleskin notebook. He seemed to always be jotting things down in it. Around 2:15 a.m., as the bow sank and the stern rose, one of the ship's funnels fell. Dick Williams saw it too late to assist his father. The funnel landed on Charles, killing him instantly as his son watched in horror. The younger Williams was plunged into the icy water. As quickly as he could, he peeled out of the fur coat that he was wearing. It had protected him against the cold wind while on deck, but now it would be more like an anchor than a source of warmth in the water. He managed to swim to a collapsible lifeboat that had not been launched properly. He, along with about 20 others, clung to the boat for dear life, hoping and praying that a ship was on the way soon. At 3:30 a.m., the Carpathia arrived in the area of the sinking. The boat containing Baer, his girlfriend, and her family would be brought on board about an hour later. It would be several more hours before they would be able to get to Williams. When he was finally pulled aboard, he struggled to walk. When he began to warm up, his legs were a worrying shade of purple, and the pain was intense, like tiny little pins being poked in and out. Carl Baer knew who Williams was, and when he saw him on board, talked to him and realized he needed more than a glass of brandy to warm up. He needed somebody to look at his legs. When a doctor examined him, he told him his legs would need to be amputated. Williams refused that advice, saying, "Doctor, I cannot lose my legs. I'm going to need them." He had to get up and walk almost constantly to restore the blood flow back to his legs. Carl helped him, carrying a lot of Dick's weight as they walked the deck of the Carpathia. It sailed into port on April 18th with 705 survivors on board. Dick Williams entered a tennis tournament just 6 weeks later, and he surprised a lot of people when he ended up winning the men's singles title in the Pennsylvania State Championships. Another 6 weeks later, on this day in 1912, Baer and Williams met each other again, this time as opponents. 1,500 spectators packed the stands at the Longwood Cricket Club on the outskirts of Boston. It was a fourth-round match between these two, and few, if any, of the attendees knew their story, nor knew their pain. Williams' grief and physical pain, Baer's struggle with survivor's guilt. But here they both were, and they played a thrilling 5-setter on grass. They used their old collegiate rivalry, Baer had been a Yale man after all, to stoke the flames of their competitive spirit. Williams jumped on Bear early, winning the first set 6-love. Williams went up 2-0 with a 9-7 win in the second set. But Bear was able to rally and win the next 3 sets 6-2, 6-1, 6-4, and take the match. These two would meet again on the court a few more times. In 1914, they met in the quarterfinals of the forerunner of the U.S. Open. Williams exacted his revenge on the veteran Bear on his way to his first of 2 national titles. Bear married Newsom in 1913, but he continued to struggle with his mental health. In 1917, he suffered a mental breakdown, and he spent several months in a sanitarium. But whispers of Bear's lack of chivalry and not going down with the ship followed him for years to come. Williams had great success in his career, not only winning the 2 U.S. championships, but playing on 5 winning Davis Cup teams, and he won a gold medal in mixed doubles in the 1924 Olympics. Both Williams and Bear would be elected to the U.S. Tennis Hall of Fame. On this day in 1999, it was an implosion of epic proportions that was equally tough to watch, yet too compelling to look away from. When Jean van de Velde came to the 18th hole at Carnoustie, he had a 3-shot lead. When he walked away from it, he was tied and heading to a playoff. He just needed a double bogey, and he could pack the claret jug in a bag and carry it back to France. Instead of playing safe, though, he pulled out his driver on the tee, and then he sent his tee shot into the rough, just shy of a burn in front of the 17th tee. No worries, he had shots to play with, plus he'd played this hole well in his 3 previous rounds with a par and 2 birdies. His second shot was not good, slicing it off the grandstand. Then his ball hit a rock, and it came to rest in thick grass in front of the Berry Burn. Okay, now this was a spot of bother. Tall grass doesn't do it justice. He was standing in an overgrown hayfield. The smart play would have been just to hit the ball 90 degrees to the left, put it back on the fairway, but instead, he elected to go for the green. So in that scenario, he had to put his club on the ball, then get it airborne, loft it over the burn, and then carry a cavernous trio of bunkers. Oh boy. But instead, the tall hay grabbed Van de Velde's wedge, slowed his club head speed down to a school zone speed, and the ball went about 30 yards into the burn, which is a spring of water, typically with high banks. At first, Van de Velde took his shoes and socks off, rolled up his pant legs above his knees, got down in the water, and to see if he could hit it. His wife Brigitte was laughing on the outside, but dying on the inside as she watched her husband's continued implosion. After a long wait, he made his best decision of the hole and took a drop and a penalty stroke instead. His next shot over the burn landed in a bunker. He would need to get up and down just to make the playoff now. If only he could have duplicated his playing partner Craig Perry's shot out of the bunker that dove in the cup for his birdie. All the ridiculousness would have just been forgotten, right? But instead, Van de Velde hit to within 8 feet and rolled that knee knocker in for a triple bogey 7 and into a tie for the lead with Paul Lowry and Justin Leonard. Lowry had actually started the day 10 shots behind Van de Velde. And Leonard, well, he had gambled with his second shot at 18, but he found trouble, and he ended up making bogey. If he plays it safe and makes par, he wins the Open Championship, no playoff needed. Of course, you're trying to make something good happen, and you're not thinking the guy behind you is going to blow up like he did. And so the trio headed to the 15th for a 4-hole aggregate playoff. Lowry made birdies on the 17th and 18th to win the playoff by 3 shots. But not many people remember who won, but just about everybody remembers who lost on this day in 1999. On this day in 1962, Bob Allison and Harmon Killebrew hit grand slams in the same inning. The Twins were at home against Cleveland, and there were actually 3 home runs hit in the inning. First, Bob Allison hit his 4 RBI 4-bagger off starter Barry Latman, which was followed by a solo shot by Earl Batty. Latman was pulled, having not retired a single batter. 3 more Twins loaded the bases for Harmon Killebrew to hit his grand slam, and the Twins scored 11 runs in the first and went on to win 14-3. And on this day in 1987, New York Yankee Don Mattingly, not known as a power hitter in his career, tied the major league record for consecutive games with a home run. Mattingly connected on a Jose Guzman offering to hit a home run in his 8th consecutive game, tying a 31-year-old record held by Pittsburgh's Dale Long. The Yankees were playing at Texas on this night, and when Mattingly hit the home run, nearly all of the 42,000 there that night cheered his effort. And time now for today's non-sports Did You Know? The U.S. government spends about $15 million annually on a program to fly a plane over Panama and drop worms. It's an eradication program for the screwworm fly. That's all for today. I'll have more tomorrow on This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.